don't put
I'm not
pregnant
saying-
orc
I'm saying you
cuddling
have
at the
to do it.
start of the Warcraft movie. You don't do that. Come on.
Well, Monty, guess what? The new World of Warcraft expansion, The War Within, has just been released, and I thought this would be a great opportunity to go back and visit a movie that I know you've been thinking about for many years. I have too. The whole Warcraft universe, and maybe even just the universe in general, has been thinking about it. But of course, I'm talking about the Warcraft movie from 2016 that was released with much hype, and then things happened. But you know, before we get any further, do you remember, Monty, that this movie was actually called Warcraft: The Beginning when they were marketing it? It's not called that anymore.
I chose to forget everything about this movie, Doa. So no, I mean, but clearly, like one of the main issues with this movie is that it sets up for a sequel and is entirely just a sequel bait for a sequel that doesn't exist.
Yes.
So it leads to a very unsatisfying ending overall. I mean, the thing, though, is I just don't care about World of Warcraft. I always disliked World of Warcraft as a game. And I know you've been playing it for a long time. You're still very active
20 years.
in World of Warcraft. What are you doing with World of Warcraft these days?
I mean, well, to start out, I played World of Warcraft from the very, very beginning. I played a tiny bit in the beta on my brother's account. He got in the beta and I didn't. And then, you know, I played it once the game came out. And so I've got characters in that game that could legally be adults. They're over 18 at this point. And so it's I've been playing for a very long time. I think next year is like 20 years of World of Warcraft, and I just have never stopped. I've been like more casual at times than others, but early on, especially like when I had more time in my youth, I was a raid leader, I was a raid tank, I was, you know, at the pinnacle of the game. Basically, I did everything. And I even own one of the original server blades from World of Warcraft. They auctioned a bunch off to charity back in like the late 2000s. And then later on, I was able to find and purchase one of those. Actually, it's the server that my brother and I played on back when the game first came out, Oldham in North America. So that's a very cool piece of memorabilia. I love the game. In fact, I have this from the War Within collector's edition. It's a giant statue of a dwarf on a griffin, and it's painted gold. So that's on my shelf as well. So you could say,
is this for the Harry Potter crossover because it's Gryffindor?
Gryffindor. Oh, you're a clever one, aren't you, Monte Cristo? But yes, so I still play a lot. Full disclosure, I also host the Mythic Dungeon International for Blizzard, so I am still.
He's actually legally obligated to not say mean things about this movie.
So I'm treading a fine line here. We'll say it that way. I gotta be honest, but I gotta be careful. I think at the same time with this one.
It's okay, though. As usual, I will be the mean one. Okay, I will be the mean one.
That's fine. I mean, I think you know, many people from in and out of Blizzard have been critical of this film over time, and it does certainly deserve a large amount of criticism. But let's talk about.
Wait. I want to talk about. I want to talk about my history with Warcraft too, because obviously
we didn't go back far enough.
in terms of esports, I started casting in Warcraft 3. So I was originally, you know, many people know me for, you know, League of Legends or Overwatch or Flashpoint with Counter-Strike or whatever, right? But my first game that I started casting in the early 2000s was actually professional Warcraft 3. I did a few LANs doing that before there was really a big esports scene. So the Warcraft games, I mean, we both grew up playing the original Warcraft game. Warcraft, especially Warcraft 2 for me, was really big thing that I did when I was a kid. And so I grew up playing Blizzard games, and I never got into WoW because I was like a semi-pro Warcraft 3 player at the time. And when WoW came out and other people were playing it, and I was being told, please go collect 10 wolf pelts. I was like, screw this. I'm going to go grind the ladder in Warcraft 3. This isn't really a video game. It's just tedious work.
Oh, come on.
And there's no competition. And it was terrible. So
no
I
competition.
basically, there's no competition. Compared to 1v1 RTS.
Now,
Anyway.
I obviously a game like Warcraft 3 is a much more competitive game at that time than World of Warcraft was, for sure. And
Yeah.
I guess I guess really it's more like 30 years I've been involved with Warcraft almost now, because one of the first RTSs I ever played was the original Warcraft Orcs and Humans on like I think it was even on DOS back then, right?
Yes.
Not even Windows. And then of course Warcraft 2, and then I actually kind of missed the boat on Warcraft 3 because that came out right during my like very busy senior year of college. And so I knew about it and I wanted to play it, but I was just like, I can't get into this right now. I need to focus on classes and things like that, which I know is weird to say for a guy who's worked in esports for the majority of his adult life, but I was more responsible back then. What can I say? But then when college ended, that's right around when World of Warcraft was coming out. And so I jumped right into that. So I missed the boat on Warcraft 3, basically. But before that, I did play the first 2 RTSs. Funny enough, I did end up being called upon to cast some Warcraft 3 at the World Cyber Games in 2012
With me.
or 13. That's right, with you, and we casted arguably the last big Warcraft 3 tournament at that time ever, where it kind of was the send off for this esport. It was very emotional, actually, being there for that, and you know, I didn't have the connection of the game that you did, obviously, in a competitive way. But it's funny that our Warcraft story is kind of entwined there at the World Cyber Games in Kunsan, China, back a little over a decade ago now.
Yeah, good times. So anyway, this is all to say, like, we've been involved with Warcraft one way or another for a very long time. This movie is based off of the story of the first game, which I think is strange choice.
We'll say loosely.
Well, but I mean, this is the time period that this story takes place, which is like pre-WoW, pre-Warcraft 2, and like it's an old game. You know, it's 20 Warcraft 1 I think was released in 94. And so I don't know how many people I don't know how many people when they come to this movie in 2016, 22 years later, have played the original game. And I thought that was an interesting choice, and by interesting, I mean bad. Because it doesn't really even hook up with a lot of, I mean, it does with some of the World of Warcraft lore, and obviously they're very conscientious about putting that in there, but it happens a long time before the game World of Warcraft, which is what most of the players who you want to appeal to this movie are going to be coming from. So I thought the time period they put this in was odd.
I agree completely. And I remember even when the game was coming out, that was kind of a point of surprise from the Warcraft community as well, because they said a lot of the same things you're saying now, right? Where it's a story that's so far back that only people like our age, you know, really remember that story, and the people that are just super into the lore of World of Warcraft, right? At the same time, it's a logical place to start if you have the assumption that this is going to end up being a franchise of films, which was obviously their plan. Because this, but
there aren't the problem is that there aren't very many
humans.
Yeah, it does, but there aren't that many recognizable characters. Like you hear about the names of these characters later on, but even your ostensibly main character Anduin Lothar dies in Warcraft 2, which is still a very old game by the time that this comes out. So it is, I think, odd.
Well, the only 2 characters that really would connect with like the World of Warcraft player would be Thrall, but he's a baby in this one.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. People would have heard about Khadgar, right?
Yeah. But it's a totally different Khadgar. It's Khadgar baby, you know. It's so you have
the name Medivh gets thrown around a lot. The name Anduin Lothar gets thrown around a lot, but they definitely are pretty early on in Warcraft lore.
Yeah, and I mean, there are certainly connections to World of Warcraft in this movie, obviously. There's a lot of the setting things. There's characters like Moros, who's the butler for Medivh, who ends up being one of the bosses in a really memorable boss, actually, in Karazhan, which was the first 10-man raid in Burning Crusade. And then, obviously, Shade of Medivh is another boss in that raid. So there are other names that people will recognize. They have a little moment with Llane Wrynn at the end, which is the father of Anduin Wrynn, who's the current king of Stormwind, although that's a murky mess right now in the game's lore. But so there are some of those connections. Garona is still around. So, you know, there's a few characters here and there, but yeah, it is a surprising story to go back to, which is totally fine if it was told in a way that didn't put a giant burden of knowledge on the viewer to understand what's going on. And that's something we're going to get into a lot more down the road. But, you know, I think those 2 things right away, that conflict is going to be a through line for this entire conversation, is the burden of knowledge that is required to really get stuff out of this movie.
Yeah. And also, I want to point out that if you look at the history of Warcraft, we have to remember where Warcraft came from. And the first game was supposed to be a licensed Warhammer game. It was not supposed to be its own intellectual property. And I think that's where a lot of the problems with Warcraft's lore come from, because this was the license for Warhammer was basically pulled, and then they had to figure out what the lore was going to be, which is not a very strong place to start. Also, at that time, Blizzard was still a pretty new company, and they didn't have, this was their first kind of foray into this sci-fi or fantasy IP, and it really shows in that. What I mean is Warcraft's lore is trash, and in the same way that League of Legends lore is trash. And sure, you might be able to do some things which like fix it later on. Arcane is good despite League of Legends lore and IP being absolute garbage, but it had to be retconned really seriously. Obviously, in League of Legends case, they had to take out the summoners and do a bunch of stuff. And also, like, it's not even tonally consistent with the rest of the League of Legends universe. It's very dark compared to the... anyway, we won't get into League of Legends lore, which is garbage. But Warcraft is also garbage. And the problem...
Yeah, go ahead.
The problem with Warcraft as a lore is that it starts okay in this time period, but it just flies out of control basically at the end of Warcraft 3 and going into World of Warcraft. And as we alluded to on our previous episode, they basically just resort to insane levels of escalation, right? Insane levels of escalation where it's not just orcs versus humans. Then they have to bring in the demons and like gods, and like everything is just like the escalation of scope is just enormous, and it becomes very tedious and boring. Why is Azeroth the battlefield of like this intergalactic war by the end? It's just stupid. And then also, they just keep making good characters bad and bad characters good. It's like Illidan bad in Warcraft 3. Oh, he's good. Oh, he's bad again. Back and forth forever. The Warden, Medivh, Shadowsong, good, bad. And so there isn't really any device, because the new big bads that they introduce are frankly just insanely boring. And I get World of Warcraft lore just explained to me by the caster of Achilles, and I just laugh while he's telling it to me because it's so dumb.
It's the thing is, and I'm gonna stop you there, right? Because I have to come in as a voice of positivity for Warcraft lore, because while I will totally agree that it is convoluted and confusing and has been retconned and has had all these issues, I don't mind that, because I love the scope of it. I love how gigantic the lore has become over the last couple decades, right?
Kill me.
And so there's so much stuff you can like dive into and go down a rabbit hole on now with the lore. It's so much fun. And sure, you're not going to find a tight storyline in anything this big. There is no lore of this size that doesn't have its issues, right? So that personally doesn't bother me. And
maybe they should just stop writing it. That would have been great.
Did you know at one point Sargeras stabs a giant sword into Azeroth and it just sat there sticking out of the desert for like 6 years?
Thank you. That's stupid. Anyway,
8 years, more like 8 years, man. That was the end of Legion, wasn't it?
I will say, like,
Battle for Azeroth. Yeah, Battle for Azeroth. Yeah.
The thing about Blizzard is that when they got cracks at making their own IP without having to like twist things from a Warhammer original IP, like when and they also got better at doing this and more experience. Like StarCraft Brood War is a great story. The original StarCraft game. Did they massacre my boy in StarCraft 2? Yes, they did. StarCraft 2 story is terrible.
Oh, no.
Diablo 1 and Diablo 2, pretty interesting story. Did they massacre my boy in Diablo 3? Of course they did. Killing Deckard Cain in-engine cutscene. High heel Diablo. I mean, it's terrible.
Don't get me started about Deckard Cain. Poor Deckard Cain. They did him so dirty.
There was a time, Noah, where, I think the writing coming from Blizzard was pretty compelling. And like StarCraft 1... StarCraft Brood War, very cool. Like Diablo 1, Diablo 2, very cool. But Warcraft was never that. Like the story in Warcraft 1 and Warcraft 2, Warcraft 3's story is probably the best of them. And then heading into World of Warcraft. But even the concepts are like at least decent that they have to work with here. I mean, the idea of having the dark portal that opens between Draenor and Azeroth, I think, is fun. It's just done very badly a lot of the time, and it's done very badly in this movie.
I like that it opens up in a lake. I think that's kind of a neat visual sort of side of things. And as far as the lore goes, I feel like going back to that, now they're kind of telling more self-contained storylines within the universe. And then you're not quite as burdened by the entire gigantic scope of things, and you have things sort of connect to it. But yeah, I don't know. I'm just a sucker for this stuff. I love it. I'm not going to claim any sort of like literary ground to stand on for this. I'm just saying I have fun with it. And so that is going to be my first thing where everyone calls me a Blizzard shill, even though if you followed my career, you know that's very much not the case. But as far as Warcraft goes,
he's being literally paid by Blizzard to do World of Warcraft right now.
As far as Warcraft goes, I have an infinite amount of forgiveness for the story, because I love it for all of its goofiness and all that. That said, this movie is not canon. This movie is not part of all of that storyline stuff. So we will look at this movie.
Why did they make it, Noah? Why did they make a Warcraft movie that wasn't going to be canon?
They should have done the Arthas storyline. If you're going to tell a story from
Yes,
from Warcraft,
the Arthas storyline is actually fire.
One. It's much easier for people to latch onto as well, the themes and that. I feel like that's a much more approachable storyline for people to get into Warcraft on. Now, at the same time, you would have the burden of explaining the whole orcs versus humans thing in that situation, because it still does play into it. Obviously, Thrall has a big part in that storyline. So I would imagine that they looked at that as a natural starting point, and then it was like, well, but then we have to explain all this and this, and then you keep going back until like, okay, now we're way back at the beginning. We can just start from here and call it Warcraft the Beginning, and see, then we could just take care of all the stuff in our future films, right? Sadly, that was not to be. It has a 29%
fortunately
score.
76%
audience score, though.
Fortunately, it was not to be. You say sadly, I say fortunately.
I say sadly, because I would absolutely watch a sequel to this.
By the way, as we announced earlier, we're going to start doing slowly going through every 1980s sword and sorcery film. I was going to point this out. We could have started that this week instead of watching this garbage. Just gonna say
but we just decided to do a 2016 sword and sorcery film,
which is way worse than a lot of those other ones.
I see this. The thing is like this. I feel like this movie though has a lot in common with a lot of that kind of pulpy sword and sorcery stuff from the 80s, and that the scope is too large. You're bombarded with lore that you're never going to understand. It's high fantasy to a point where there's just weird stuff.
Yeah, but it has none of the charm, though. It has none of the jankiness. It has none of the charm. And also, it's like
I will carry this Warcraft bias throughout this episode.
It's not terrible enough to be funny, and it's not good enough to be good. So it just ends up in this place that is neither like hilariously bad nor actually good, where it's just fucking boring. This movie's just fucking boring.
I wouldn't say it's boring the way you say it's boring, but I do agree that it's not bad enough to be funny bad, and it's not good enough to be like, I think this is a good movie. I think it is kind of in that nether realm there, where like the people that let's be fair, let's be honest here. The people that enjoy this movie are people that are just big fans of Warcraft, and they get a kick out of seeing a lot of the stuff on the screen. That's where I'm at with this. For me, this movie is mostly like a visual thing, where I like seeing all these things, because they crushed it visually with this film. The CG was fantastic. There's one thing, and I know you know exactly what I'm talking about, but I think the sets were fantastic. The environments were really great. For the most part, the costuming was great, except for that one thing that we're going to talk about. Everything else was great. They got the big, bulky, ridiculous Warcraft armor right. They didn't skimp on any of that.
That's a negative, by the way.
That's great, because it's game accurate. This is a video game movie, Monty. You have to keep that in mind. And video game movies get points for being closer to the video game they're representing. And so when it comes to Warcraft, one of the things that's most notable about the World of Warcraft is giant shoulder pads, and giant shoulder armor. And I'm not talking about like the Talking Heads kind of shoulder pads. I'm talking about like the giant metal kind of stuff with spikes sticking out everywhere and all that.
Negative point.
It's totally a positive point. Monty's very wrong on this. This point is a positive point, that they were able to bring that from the game to a live action setting, and it worked for me and for Warcraft fans out there. I think it absolutely worked. Now, you had some interesting points about how this movie did when it came out, because obviously critics, I think, appropriately panned it. It did not make a ton of money in the U.S. However, it seemed to do fairly well overseas.
Yeah, it made under $50 million in the U.S., but it made almost $400 million internationally. A lot of it in China. So the movie was very popular in China, and in fact is still the highest grossing video game film of all time. Did it lose money? Yes, but not a lot of money, actually. It wasn't like a giant flop or anything.
Yeah.
And it was only the second movie ever at the time of its release to earn less than $100 million in the United States while simultaneously making more than $100 million in China. The first movie to do that was Terminator Genesis. Also, weirdly,
What? What?
Yeah,
Terminator
very popular
Genesis.
in China. Terminator Genesis, very popular in China, not popular in the United States. But
I don't understand this world.
this movie did make about $450 million, which is
Yeah.
it also cost a lot to make, so it did end up losing money. It cost $160 million. It's a very expensive movie.
Especially for 2016 too. That wasn't that long ago.
Very,
That was
very
a
expensive
huge budget.
movie. Huge,
We're used
enormous.
to hearing about, and we're used to hearing about those budgets now from like big Marvel films or Dune or something like that, But at that time,
not even Dune.
Dune was pretty close though, right? Dune was like
I guess
150 or
Dune 2 was pretty close.
Dune 2 is pretty close. But the thing is that I wonder too if it would have been closer to actually making a bit of money.
It was $190 million for Dune 2. You're right. Yeah.
Oh, okay. There. So one of the big things
it was
I remember
still less cost than The Acolyte. The Acolyte cost more money than this.
Well,
So
another reason
throw
why
that
The
in there.
Acolyte is like one of the biggest pieces of trash ever put on screen. But I would watch this movie 100 times before I watch The Acolyte again. I'll put that out there right away, right now. But so another thing with this movie that a lot of people might not remember is that there was a massive, massive marketing push in the US with this. Like there were tie-ins everywhere for this movie. They really, really did try to get this movie in front of as many people as possible. Again, with the intent.
How do you remember this? We weren't even living in the U.S. when it was released. We were in Korea.
Yeah, but I was following all this stuff really closely though, because I was just really excited. I was a WoW player, and the playing WoW in Korea was one of my very few negatives about living in Korea, because the ping was so high playing on North American servers from Korea that I couldn't do like a higher tier rating and things like that I did before, because I would just die to boss mechanics before I saw them happen on my screen. So I was like, all right, I was a filthy LFR casual for a while there. But and hey, before you say, like many people have told me, why don't you just play on the Korean servers? Well, because it's in Korean, and my Korean is okay, but it's not good enough to play World of Warcraft and be in a Korean WoW guild. All right, that's why I had to still play in the US on the NA servers. So that was one of the few negatives. But amid all that, I was very excited about the Warcraft movie coming out, and just again seeing all the stuff on the screen, and yeah, all the I'm trying to remember all the different marketing pushes, but there were many tie-ins with fast food things and junk food and all the other places really they marketed to the wrong people. I think with a lot of that, they marketed to the people that were already going to go to the film. When I think about it now, they should have put up advertisements in like gyms or something, or at baseball games.
That's right.
Places where you
at the
seldom
gym.
find World of Warcraft players, and I can say this
Strive
because I'm
to
a World
look
of
like
Warcraft player.
Durotan.
That's right. And Durotan never accepted the Fel either. So yeah, you want to be buff like Durotan, pure from the Fel. The
That's
Fel
right.
is just steroids when it comes down.
no roids
is,
for Durotan.
The Fel is just an allegory for drugs. It's like you get a taste of the Fel, you're like, oh, I need that Fel. Give me that Fel. But it corrupts you. They cut one of the best scenes around the Fel in the movie. There's a cut scene where they're all around the campfire talking about the Fel and all that, and talking about how it makes you so strong and everything. And I think it's Grom Hellscream who's talking about how buff it's making me. He does a big like flex or whatever, and he's like, oh, I'm huge. And then Ogrim just goes, yes, but you're green. And then they all just start laughing at him.
Yes, but you're green.
And I thought that was such a great scene because you just have this huge like display of power, and they're like, yeah, but you turned green. That's hilarious. That's a thing they should have put in the movie, but they didn't. Oh well, it's funny to me anyway. Shut up, Monty. Anyway, so this movie was directed by Duncan Jones, who, besides being the son of David Bowie, which is kind of a unique, distinguishing feature, Also directed Moon, which was a
Very good movie.
science fiction film. Yeah. So I remember there being a lot of excitement about this being the guy to direct it. Cause I want to say they were thinking about like Sam Raimi directing the Warcraft movie originally.
He was supposed to direct it originally. Yes.
Yeah. And so that was exciting. And imagine what a Sam Raimi Warcraft movie would have been like. It would have been a very different film. Would have been very interesting. But then,
the thing is, Duncan Jones came in, and once Sam Raimi pulled out, it was a different script, and Duncan Jones came in and rewrote the script for this.
That's right. Him and something Levitt. I can't remember.
Charles Levitt.
But Charles Levitt, right? So, I'm really curious about, maybe this information's out there and I wasn't able to find it, but I'm very curious about the involvement of the Blizzard writers in the writing of this film. Because when you look at this film, you'd have to imagine anyone who, either one of two things happened. Either they were too involved and there was too much of I'm not going to explain this because I just forgot that most people don't know it when it comes to the burden of lore again. Or, they weren't very involved, and I feel like they would have looked at this stuff and had the opposite reaction, where it's like, well, all this stuff, like, people wouldn't know this if they didn't play the game. This wouldn't be as meaningful. So we have to explain this. We have to kind of condense this or, tone it down a bit. But, it's interesting, some of the things they changed. But I am very curious about what the writing process was for this movie, why they decided to do what they do, because it certainly didn't make it any easier to follow. Even watching it for this show, watching it again, I was like, man, this movie does not track well. It is difficult to follow what's going on, what people's motivations are. Like it's a mess. Like I love this movie visually, but storytelling wise, it is all over the place.
It's actually hard for me to know how good this movie actually is because my mind fills in all the blanks because I know what the story is supposed to be or like what the elements of this universe are, but it really doesn't explain anything, and which is terrible, especially by the end of this film, where I understand look, it's not a good movie and it should be critically panned even if it did explain itself because it's just bad, but even if it wasn't just bad, like I understand why the critics would pan this, because if you are coming into this with no knowledge, you would have zero clue what is happening in this she
I watched this movie with my wife, who has never played a Warcraft game, or and she was very confused. she liked the visual side of it. Again, like there's a lot of neat looking things, but story wise, like nobody's gonna follow this if they don't know WoW, But so I feel like that's a good point to get into the plot, right? And we move quick, so watch out, because and I'm not just saying us moving quick. I'm saying like the plot moves very, very, very fast. I do like the opening vignette of the orcs kind of discussing what it means to come through the portal and go to this new land. The Fel is introduced as something that's like powerful but dangerous. And then it ends with like this couple that's kind of been resisting the Fel. Their newborn child is saved by that power, and then it's like. So I like that. If you take that vignette on its own, I like that. But then nothing is really done with it for the rest of the film.
A new warrior for the Horde.
Okay,
which is unfortunate.
I mean, right off the bat, at the start of this film, I have to question who this movie is for. Okay, so what would you say?
Yeah,
what would you say that the average, what would you say the demographic of World of Warcraft players is?
At that time, I mean, it really depends because it's an intergenerational game now. So you probably had a mix of adults and children at this movie, and I think the movie was rated PG-13, if I recall.
What do you think? How many men compared to women would you say play World of Warcraft?
Honestly, it's probably not as male dominated as you think. Like all the guilds I've been in over the years have had more women playing than like in other video games I played when you have online communities.
Optimistically, 80%?
Yeah, probably. I don't know, something like that. So more than your average game, but I don't have the stats. I'm sure the stats are out there somewhere.
If 80% of your audience that's familiar with Warcraft is men, what do you think the appeal is of the first thing you see on screen being a pregnant orc cuddling in bed, and then having a birth
not all
scene?
Men are heartless, Monty.
I'm just saying that's not how you write movies for men. Period. It's not how you do it. It's not how you do it.
All right,
No,
sure.
nobody, probably even women, nobody on Earth, Doa, wants this movie to start with CGI pregnant orcs cuddling in bed. Nobody wants that.
Can you hide your fat belly?
Better than you can hide your fat head.
I
Zero
disagree with
human
you.
beings want that. It's
I disagree with you
trash.
completely. It's needed. That scene is necessary because one of the main things that this movie tries to do, and again, I'm saying this is necessary for what they were trying to do. I'm not saying that they were successful in doing it. What they were trying to do is you're going to have an orcs and humans movie. You need to find a way to humanize the orcs, which
You
sounds
don't do
weird
it
to
right
say
off
it.
the bat, Doa. You don't do it to start the fucking movie. You don't put
I'm not saying-
pregnant orc
I'm saying
cuddling
you have
at the
to do it.
start of the Warcraft movie. You don't do that. Come on.
That wasn't actually the start of the movie, though. The start of the movie was an orc and human fighting each other. That was the actual start of the first scene in the movie. In case you've forgotten, the cuddling was the second scene in the movie. Ha, exposed. What a poser, Monty, not even paying attention to the film that he's yelling
Yes,
and jumping around about.
They put a scene in there, Doa, that is a complete non sequitur to start
know.
the film. That is
Orcs
like
and humans fought for a long time, but before that, orcs cuddled.
Doa, it's so trash. Like
You gotta humanize the orcs. You gotta make them.
you can
seem
do
like,
that, but you have
gotta
to
give some
establish the
sympathy to those
characters before that. You can't just
That's how
show
they
like
establish the characters.
it's a terrible way to establish characters. It's just god awful writing, and it's fundamentally not a great entry point for your likely audience.
It's a point to at that time make people go, wow, look at how great those CG orcs look. Look at how realistic their faces are. That is the reason for that scene. Is the reason for that scene is to, well, humanize orcs, what we're talking about, but also to get you to buy into the effects. Like that is very much a scene to be like, all right, you have to treat these characters like you would treat the.
But
human
I
characters.
don't buy into the effects because it's so disconcerting and off-putting.
I thought they're quite good. Even now.
I don't look, I think a lot of the CGI is very good. I think that introducing the CGI in that manner is not a good entry point because I'm like, it's like Uncanny Valley shit. It's like, wait, I'm supposed to feel something for pregnant orc? Like, it's weird. It's weird.
They look different enough that it didn't bother me that much. And, again, it's like, it's hard for me to tell how much of this is objective and how much of this is just decades of Blizzard cinematics where I just like Blizzard cinematics, and this had that quality to it, So maybe that helps you kind of get over that uncanny valley that you're describing.
Even Blizzard has not been dumb enough to start a cinematic with pregnant orcs, Stoa.
There's been a lot of heart-to-hearts in Blizzard cinematics lately, though. Not as much action, so you might be surprised. You might be surprised.
It sounds like I would be unpleasantly surprised. Anyway,
the effects are great, and the scene starts out with orc cuddling. Like we talked about, the orcs come through. Thrall is born, but he's like gonna die, and so they suck the soul out of a deer and give it to Thrall.
By the way, the going into labor in the void of space between worlds also made me throw up in my mouth a little bit. It's just fucking terrible.
I guess it's not a good idea to go through the dark portal when you're about to have.
Who could have known? Who could have known? Who could have known?
Who knew? They wouldn't have been able to. Durotan needs his cuddling, and if Draka doesn't come along, he's not going to be able to cuddle during the war to conquer Azeroth. All right, it's very, very reasonable. Yeah. So anyway, that happens, but unfortunately, then we get to the human characters, which are by far worse than the orc characters in this movie in almost every regard. I don't even know where to start. Like,
I mean, Durotan is probably the only interesting character in this whole movie.
Yeah. And I mean, it's fun to Durotan's conversations with Ogrim Doomhammer are probably some of the best things in the film for sure.
I'll give you that.
You don't think it's strange that we lost our home when Gul'dan came to power? One orc cannot kill a world, Durotan. Are you sure? Look around you. Does it not remind you of something?
Yeah, and it's interesting. The set piece of this is not like one nation of orcs. These are like separate clans that have sort of a tenuous agreement to engage in this thing together because their world is dying, right? But then it's like, oh, did we do that? Steve Urkel voice to our world. Is this world just going to die again? Like, so there's that conflict within, right? So, and
the war within, if you will.
The war within, exactly. Yeah. Different within. And then on the Alliance side too, you obviously have a very tenuous, loose allegiance of various races and city states and things like that too. So it's a lot of not getting along, and which is hilarious because of the extent Stormwind tries to go to get along with everyone. But now we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit. So, so basically the humans find out that orcs are trashing some stuff. They go out to investigate. Khadgar, by the way, Teenage Dream Khadgar is investigating the barracks because he knows what killed this dude. It's the Fell. And so they bring him along. They meet some orcs. One of the Black Hand throws a horse at some people, which is kind of fun to see. And then they capture the worst character in the film, Garona, half orc, which I think you and I are
by the way, anytime
they
said her name, I was just in my head going, my Garona. Every time.
Man, like in a movie of great looking characters, Garona stands out as the character that looks like the cosplay contestant that got on set accidentally. I don't know what went so wrong with the costuming. This is no.
By the way, it looks super scuffed, especially in the first scene, because when she's in the complete CGI world and it's just her with all the CGI orcs, it stands out so painfully, right?
Yeah, I don't know what you do with that. And I mean, and the thing is, in the games, she's not half human. Actually, she's half Draenei. Those blue dudes at the beginning that Gul'dan sucks the souls out of. She is actually half Draenei, which kind of explains why she can speak their language at that first scene. But then 10 minutes later, she's able to speak English passably well too. She's like, "Oh, I learned it from the prisoners." Yeah, but like, did you either learn
that
it
was
like
10 minutes ago,
really, really fast, or were there human prisoners on Draenor that we never saw? Like, it's like if they started out the movie with game Garona, and then like 20 minutes in, she was like half human Garona, which is what she is in the movie universe. So that had a very weird element that like, oh, we need someone to translate. I guess it's Garona, and I guess she has to be half human now. And I guess we're going to imply that Medivh is her dad later in the movie. But yep, that's, again, we're getting ahead of ourselves. So they find Garona and immediately unleash her in the throne room next to the king and queen and all the people that are most important in the realm. They just kind of let her walk around. And as she's still being threatening, and the entire time you're thinking, why do you trust her? Because she looks kind of like you. I mean, she speaks your language kind of. Like, really, this is your reason?
Well, it's also insane, and this goes into plot armor, because like we talk about our segment plot armor. In this Warcraft movie, Garona is basically just immune to everything, even though we are told but never shown. Oh yes, she is shunned. Her name means cursed. Like the orcs hate her. She got beat up a lot. Literally, none of this ever actually happens in the movie.
And we can't show everything. Who is this movie for, Monty?
You have to show that the orcs hate her in some way, but they're literally just asking for her to translate things, and she seems like, I don't know, pretty fucking helpful on the other side of the dark portal, and pretty useful.
There's a lot of tell don't show around the backstory for her characters.
But then she gets captured. So keep in mind that this is an invasion from another planet, and the orcs are coming. And so the reaction of Stormwind is to capture her, and then just the queen goes into her cell and offers her food and drink and blankets. And like, what the fuck is going on here? Wouldn't they be insanely paranoid about her? And they're just like, well, we just really want to be friends. And like, can't you go back to your world? Our world is dying. It's like, do you not, Stormwind, are you just idiots? Like, are you just idiots that you just don't understand the severity of this threat? She is also being literally threatening to you. And then they just give her a weapon and they're like, go crazy, Garona. And then, by the way, Doa, she just switches sides for, as far as I can tell, no fucking reason, despite the only possible reason is because other people say like, well, aren't you in love with Anduin Lothar? And she's like, I don't know, am I? And we as the audience are like, I don't know, is she? Because we don't actually see that there is a progression to their character arc or the relationship. And that's it. And then she just switches side and starts murdering all the orcs.
Well, you've heard of the phrase, you kill them with kindness. You've heard that phrase, right, before? But Stormwind takes it further. They're like, kill us with kindness. Kill us with our own kindness. Because that happens in the end of the movie. We'll get there. But, spoiler alert. But, I was thinking about, like, why in the world would they be motivated to do this? Like, they've positioned the Stormwindians as the people of Stormwind as like the ones trying to hold the alliance together and trying to be the diplomatic ones and the peacemakers and all that. But it goes to the extent that they kind of act like the crew of the Starship Enterprise, to the extent that they really want to have peaceful relations with everything they meet, no matter how threatening it is initially. Because I feel like that's the type of thing you would see in a Star Trek episode, right? Where it's like this extreme dedication to peace and finding common ground and all that. And in Star Trek, it works because that is set out to be their mission from the beginning. And they also have the benefit of technological defenses that they can call in at any time and be safe, where it doesn't work in this movie.
Or they can fly away, Doa. Crucially,
exactly,
they can leave.
They can teleport. Yeah. So
I doubt even the Federation would be as cool if, like, you remember what happened when the Borg tried to take Earth? The Federation wasn't so cool then, guys. They just were trying to kill the Borg. Weird.
They did try to establish a dialogue first, you know. That's but my point is, it works in Star Trek because of those reasons I listed. It doesn't work for the people of Stormwind because they don't have any of that technology backing them up. We aren't given any reason why they should be this extremely friendly to someone they captured from a party that was out there killing outposts constantly in a fight where a bunch of murdering their people. Right. And like now it's like, would you like some tea? It's kind to the ridiculous extreme. And it just doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't make any sense at all.
I just think
Garona's weirded out for it, but it works.
I just think it's so funny too how she is a character played by an actual actor, but it totally breaks the realism of the orcs because she's just like airbrushed green with these little tiny little teeth, and she wearing like a leather bikini, and then she's just put next to, I don't know, the other orc women. It doesn't.
That is a character. That is a character right out of an 80s sci-fi film, right there. You want your 80s fantasy film connection?
That's some like Garona. Original Star Trek original series alien level.
I know, right? So it just does. The character just doesn't work visually, and like I said, it's the one thing that stands out to me in a very negative way visually with this whole film. But like it makes Stormwind, it makes people Stormwind look like a cult, where they're like they really just want her to be like one of us, you know. It's like, hey, would you like some tea? We'll let you out of the cell. We'll let you wear our clothes. Well, sure. Well, you know, I feel like it's like gonna end up like Midsummer for Garona or something like that, you know? Like she's clearly weirded out by it, but she's, you know, been so mistreated, we're told, by the orcs that she decides to adopt the human side of her family, which would she even know what her other half was? I guess she did say she knew earlier that like a human came and like was like like hanging out with her mom, and that's how she came around, I guess. And then the guy left, and it turns out that was Medivh just like skipping his way across the planets.
Medivh went out for orc cigarettes and never came back.
Right. Medivh just out there like doing like Draenor Tinder and stuff, I guess. But like I don't know, like the Guardian, like Medivh, what are you up to, man?
What's Medivh into, man?
Years.
That's what happens when you're just alone in your tower for years, sculpting golems, dude. You get the hots for orcs.
You just go out and make love across the universe. What can you say? Medivh he's a lover,
spreading
not a fighter.
his seed across the stars.
The war within. So you know, let's back with our wonderful plot, right? So you know, we've got Khadgar as well, who we found was apparently taken away from his parents, like a Jedi Padawan, to become a wizard as a child, to become a mage. and then decided he didn't want to be a mage, so he left the Kirin Tor. They let him keep his tattoo, which is like
Which,
a
by
metal
the way,
detector
I love his tattoo because his tattoo's function is to serve as like a hot and cold detector that finds Glenn Close. It's a Glenn Close detector.
Oh, you noticed that too. You noticed it was Glenn Close as well. All right.
And what do you mean? How could you not notice it was Glenn Close? It's like so obviously Glenn Close.
It's a lot more easy to notice that this is Glenn Close in this movie. The cameo later on is what's your character's name? I was written down somewhere. Aladi. Yeah.
Aladi. By the way, in another example of people trusting each other immediately. So remember, he was kicked out of he abandoned the Kirin Tor. But he goes back and he just says the word Aladi, and then they just let him inside the cube in like the next, no joke, guys, 10 seconds of the movie. It takes them 10 seconds for the Council of Mages to go from "you betrayed us" to "please enter the inner sanctum and touch our artifacts." Like what is happening in this movie?
Yeah, well, they're kind of like, how'd you know that name? It's like, she was one of the previous Guardians. Everybody knows who Aladi was. If you've read a history book, everyone should know, right? In this universe, like it's even in the movie. That should be obvious. But
and also, it's like shouldn't they know that because they gave him a Glenn Close detector tattoo? So
that's true.
It can't be that hard to find Glenn Close when you just point your arm around.
That's right. And this is one of the great and memorable Glenn Close cameos too. The other one being the pirate and Hook. The other memorable Glenn Close cameo. Yeah, she pops up in these movies every once in a while. Yeah, she was. In case you're not aware, Glenn Close also played the pirate that was put in the boo box, so in the chest that they dropped scorpions into. Yes. That was Glenn Close actually. Yeah. So there you go. You never know where Glenn Close is going to show up. Maybe a Peter Pan film. Maybe a Warcraft film.
By the way, we could call the room in which I was watching this movie the boo box for me yelling boo at this movie constantly.
Wow. Okay. Well, we'll let that one fly. We'll that one go. So, man. Oh yeah, Lothar's got a son, by the way. They do mention earlier the Queen, Lothar's sister, by the way, keeps putting Callan in prestigious positions, and he's like, "Stop doing that. That's nepotism. That's embarrassing, right?" And she keeps doing it. And then he dies. That's right. And so back to another edition of who's this movie for anyway? We have the brutal murder of the main character's beloved only son, whose mother died in childbirth as well, where Blackhand stabs him through the torso and then throws him against a wall right in front of his dad. And his dad's response is just sort of look at him in the same way that I might look at someone who just like backed into my parked car. I'd be upset, but I wouldn't be, I'd be like, what? But seeing something like that, you'd expect he'd be like on his knees, freaking out kind of stuff. And he has kind of a drinking binge later on, but the reaction's not really there. Again, are we doing a serious war film, or are we doing a fun action adventure film? Because there's lots of fun action adventure-y moments in this, and then there's stuff like that, which again, that's another thing that makes me think of the 80s fantasy films, where a lot of those had no idea what kind of film they were. Dude. And there would be these weirdly overly grim things that happened out of nowhere. I'm telling you, this movie is a lot like a lot of those films.
It's just worse. I love the fact that they were in the alleged drinking scene. First off, they show no drinking. And second off, it's like in the tavern from Hearthstone, the video game. So it's like a cartoon tavern, and he's just lying on the bar with his comically oversized tankard. And it looks so hilariously like childish, and he's just mourning the death of his son while being passed on the bar. I'm like, what is the tone? What is the tone supposed to be in this scene? Am I supposed to be like sad about this, or is this funny? Like, is this just black comedy where he's just in the cartoon bar, like passed out on the bar,
cartoon drunk? Yeah. The thing is though, that bar, I believe that's still the same bar earlier in the film, which is the Lion's Pride Inn in Goldshire, one of the most famous taverns in all of World of Warcraft. You know that if you played the game, Monty, but you don't, so you miss that little tidbit. I gotta say, the interior of that bar is like dead on to like what the game.
Fabulous.
has,
they did nostalgia debate. and made it crap. Cool.
I told you this film is not for. It's not for you. It's not for people like you, Monty. It's for Warcraft fans. All right, that's who this movie's for. We get
Like
to
Duncan
see all these
Jones,
things.
renowned
like,
Warcraft fan.
I don't know. He probably played at the time. Who knows? Maybe he did. Maybe he did play World of Warcraft. Hold on, I'm gonna Google it. Is Duncan Jones?
He may have played it. He may have played it. He may have played it a little bit, but honestly, like it just feels like disgusting fan service.
Well, it says, it says, well, here, Duncan Jones, according to Wowpedia, by the way, he has played every game in the Warcraft series, including the original Warcraft Orcs and Humans when it was first released. His first WoW character was a human warrior. One of his favorite areas in the game is Alliance Pride Inn, which is one of the other reasons why it appeared in the movie. So there you go. Yeah, he was. It seems like from what we
now know that he played until at least level 2 in the Alliance as he went to Goldshire.
Yeah. That's true. He made it to level 5 at least.
He made it to level 5.
That's when you go to Goldshire, yeah, or 6 if you like to really spend a lot of time in the entry area. Yeah, but apparently he did play the game. Yeah, and I remember hearing that when it came out. That I remember seeing interviews with him where he was very excited to do this movie. Legitimately, when you go back and look at some of those interviews, I watched a couple of them leading up to this, and he was really like gung ho about, all right, let's make a good video game movie. It's possible, and we can do it with Warcraft. Like he really believed that that this could be the one. After a slew of bad video game movies out there, with the exception of the 1990s Mortal Kombat film, we could finally have a great video game movie. And I think visually we got there, but story wise, well, we'll keep going. So anyway, Durotan decides to meet up with the Stormwindians and say, hey, you know what, Gul'dan's kind of creeping me out too. I don't want to take the steroids. Let's topple him together. They try to do that. There's an ambush because Ogrim Doomhammer, Durotan's buddy, betrays them to Gul'dan because he's like, orcs before humans, bro. And then he feels bad about it later. But that's when Anduin Lothar's child dies.
O's before hoes, as we say.
That's right. But in the middle of this, Medivh is just acting all weird and crazy. And we're kind of getting the impression that he's a bad guy. We're kind of getting the impression that he's the one that kind of let the orcs in, but we don't really know why. That's never really established in the movie. In the games, I believe it is. He's being affected by the Fel. He's being affected by the demonic influences, and so that's how he is in contact with Gul'dan and stuff like that to make this stuff happen in the game sense. But we never really get a reason in the movie.
Nope. He just becomes a demon for absolutely no reason. He has no motivation. I mean, it's incredibly flawed, though, because he does have motivation in the game. So his motivation in the games is that the Burning Legion, which is the interdimensional demonic force, is trying to invade Azeroth. So what they do is they take over Gul'dan and Medivh, and they make them communicate with each other. They open the portal so the orcs can come in, cause a bunch of chaos, weaken Azeroth so the demons can take it over. That is the plot. But none of that is explained in this movie. It's literally just Gul'dan is doing fel magic for funsies. Medivh is betraying his people because he feels like it, I guess. And then he gets taken over by a demon. But it's never, the Burning Legion is not even mentioned. Sargeras isn't mentioned. None of the stuff that comes up in the Warcraft lore.
Monty. If we got into the Burning Legion, people would just be confused, all right?
I mean, the Burning Legion is stupid, but at least it's an explanation for what happens.
There's some throwaway line from Medivh towards the end of the movie where it's like, I was just doing it for the people, where it's like I think like the explanation is that he was trying to like gain more power in order to protect things, to be a better guardian. But then the Fel, he just wanted to hit more home runs, but then the Fel ended up affecting him in awful ways. He became a slave to it then, and made a bunch of mistakes, right? But it came from a good place. That's I think that's the official in-film explanation from what I can glean from the few words that are dedicated
but the problem
major
is
motivation of one of our main villains.
The problem is that Medivh never does anything helpful in this movie. So it's not even a complex character. He literally is just trying to he's trying to sabotage them from the start. He goes in and he just burns all of Khadgar's notes. He's like, "You surely can't discover what I'm doing." Blows up all his notes. And then obviously that's incredibly suspicious. And Anduin Lothar's like, I wonder if he is up to some shenanigans.
It's not very subtle. He doesn't cover his trail well. So basically what happens then is, you know, we have Durotan gets captured. Ogrim has a change of heart, uncaptures Durotan, helps the Black Wolf clan mostly get to safety or whatever and escape, but Durotan stays because he wants to fight Gul'dan and Mak'gora in the the one-on-one combat.
Which by the way is a very convenient Deus Ex Machina for the plot, because they don't explain the rules of this at any point in time. They don't set it up previously. It only exists so that they don't murder Durotan instantaneously, and
well,
that you
exists in the game though too, doesn't it?
It doesn't matter.
Is from the games.
It doesn't matter. You have to introduce it as a concept, because otherwise it's just like, oh, well, I guess Durotan gets to fight for his life now, even though that doesn't make any sense, considering that Gul'dan is just recklessly murdering everybody throughout this entire thing. Why would he even enter into single combat? It's crazy.
They do it earlier. They mention Mak'gora earlier, and then it comes back later in the film when Durotan challenges him. I'm trying to remember exactly when it was, but it all blends together in this movie. So anyway, the plan is for Durotan to fight Gul'dan, because technically, like, he's not a chief anymore, so they don't need to Mak'gora, but Gul'dan's too cocky, you know, because he's roided up on the fell, and he's like, I'm just gonna make it quick, and but that's what Durotan wants. He wants everybody to see Gul'dan suck the life out of him, because then like, oh, that's not a fair fight.
Gul'dan cheats!
And it almost works until Gul'dan like kills 3 of the orcs and was like, hey, yeah, you're following me anyway. And they're like, oh, okay.
May your bones rot, demon! Anyone else?
Work, you know.
Which, by the way, makes it even funnier, because the second time this happens with Lothar, right? And all of a sudden then, what I don't understand, Doa, is if the orcs didn't like that because it was against their tradition and he cheated and he had no honor, but then he just kills a few of them and then they all fall back in line, then why doesn't that same trick work the second time when Lothar wins? He's like, kill Lothar. They're like, we can't do it. Why doesn't he just kill Lothar? And then if anybody objects again, just kill them. You know, exactly the same thing he did.
Oh, it's because Black Hand and Lothar have beef, and Gul'dan likes to watch a good fight, I guess.
No. But after Lothar wins and he wants to kill Lothar, why doesn't he just kill Lothar? And if people disagree with him, just kill some more orcs, because we know they just all fall back in line. So
it's
the fact that it's done,
Garona's there to tell Gul'dan not to, and be like, no, Gul'dan, they would follow you if you do that.
But also they hate Garona, so why would they listen to her? I mean, the whole thing is just ridiculous.
I don't have any explanation for either. Yeah. Oh, by the way, Garona kills the king. We kind of glossed over that part, because he sees some scary orcs coming towards him, and he's like, you better kill me. And she's like, wait, what? he's like, no, I'm just so nice. I'm the nicest person in the entire universe. I want you to get back into your clan and make peace.
We're surrounded. Your killing me is the only hope we have for peace. You told Lady Taria that killing her would bring you honor. Well, killing me will make you a hero.
And the only way that can possibly happen, the only way, is if you kill me. And
which by the way,
I mean,
he was going to die anyway. He was going to die anyway, because, you know, they had been cut off from Stormwind. But here's the thing, Doa. We know that the Dark Portal had been disrupted and all of the orcs aren't going to come through at this time. So why do you need him to die to elevate Garona's status for them to make peace? Because now what we know is the orcs are actually stuck there with no reinforcements. So in theory, they should be probably more accepting of some kind of peace deal if they know the cavalry's not arriving, right?
Yeah, And also, why is anyone listening to Garona at all? Because she's just spent the last half hour killing other orcs right in front of the orcs and clearly fighting for the enemy. And then she just turns around and murks the king, and they're like, oh, well.
In a situation where that king is 100% going to die because the portal to Stormwind closes.
Like right there.
So if anything, Garona stabbing him, if I was an orc, I'd be like, we were going to kill that guy anyway. You just did that so we wouldn't kill you at the end. Yeah, first off, kill stealer. And second off, you just did that so that we wouldn't just immediately kill you as soon as this battle was over in this battle. You don't it would look very cynical for her in a 100% doom situation to suddenly switch sides. Like, would you trust anybody in that situation? Of course you wouldn't.
To be fair to Garona, she didn't think that wasn't her idea.
But it worked.
That was Llane Wrynn's idea. Where he was like, oh no, you better kill me.
Also, why would King Llane know that would be the outcome? Is he somehow versed in orc culture?
That's a good point. That conversation must have happened off camera, I guess.
So is he versed? So Garona just told him, if I kill you, they'll listen to me. Like, that conversation never happens. But these are invaders from another planet that King Llane has never seen.
Oh, wait. I know. I have the explanation. I figured it out. So earlier, when Garona and the queen are talking in the cell, she's like, oh, if I killed you, I'd be really popular with my orc friends. The queen must have then went and told the king, hey, we didn't see this. This wasn't in the movie, by the way, but I'm assuming there's another conversation that happened late that night. They were about to go to bed, and the queen was like, oh, hey, when I was talking with Garona in the cell, she was like, if she kills me, it'll be like a really big deal. So I bet if she kills you, everyone would really love her. And he's like, oh, that's interesting information. I might have to use that at some point.
I might have to use that if I want to die. Like, what?
Maybe King Llane is just, we saw the meetings he had to sit through, the committee meetings with I have to rage. Okay, wait. I got two things I have two more things I have to rage about. Those committee meetings. So, okay, they're literally ravaging the kingdom of Stormwind, right? Okay, the orcs are just fucking it up. And everybody is around this table, and Lordaeron and like the dwarves and everybody, and the night elves are like, now we're not going to help you. And he's like, but they're like summoning a giant portal. Can't we just work together? We've helped you. And they're like, no. I do like that the very few times we saw the elves, I do like that they had the elves be all sort of like battle scarred and stuff too. They weren't like the clean, the super clean elves of every other fantasy.
Don't talk about
thing.
that. Let's talk about the fact that scene lasts about 10 seconds where they're just like, no, we're not going to help you. There's never an explanation for why they won't help them. I mean, by all accounts, Stormwind seems pretty chill. They literally just want to hang out with Garona for some reason. So why wouldn't everybody like them? And they're like, no, we can't possibly offer you help. We're too busy. Busy with what? What are you guys busy with?
Stormwind is like that person that's trying too hard to be friends with everyone in the group, where they're just like, they'll like buy gifts for people at weird occasions, and they're like, oh, you didn't have to do that, and they're like, oh no, I just wanted to, and you're like, thanks, but it's awkward, Stormwind is like that on a realm scale, right? Where it's like they show up to the Dwarven lands and they're like, hey, we've got like a bunch of these great swords, or like, hey, we'd love to buy a bunch of your weapons, and like, you guys make your own weapons, right? Like, yeah, but we'd love to buy yours because we want to support local artisans. And they're like, okay, sure. And then they're like, well, that was weird when they leave. That's Stormwind in a nutshell, I guess.
But my other favorite King Llane moment is
the deep run tram.
the battle that takes place at the end. So it's raging around them. Garona and Llane are there, and there's like 10 feet of they're in the middle of combat with 10 feet, and they're having this very quiet conversation. Like, you've got to kill me. And meanwhile, there's like orcs and like, but I mean, it's like the fact that they can have this intimate conversation while this camera's like spinning around overhead, showing the combat that is raging around them is just so fucking hilarious.
The combat in this movie, for a movie called Warcraft, the war part is not very good. The fight choreography is about as budget fantasy fight choreography as you can muster. It's not great. I mean,
compare this to the fight category, the fight choreography in like Lord of the Rings, which was like over a decade earlier. I mean, exactly. Lord of the Rings just destroys this movie in every way.
this was popcorn stuff, right? It's like it was very, you know, they put a lot of attention into certain aspects of this film, and the actual combat was not one of those things. I think there were a couple neat, like I said, there are a couple neat orc moments, like when Blackhand throws a horse at some people. That's kind of a cool thing that shows the power of the orcs, and like when an orc hits someone with a big hammer or something like that, feels like, oh man, that person had no chance. So they do a good job of making the orcs feel individually threatening. But when it comes down to like that last fight and stuff, then yeah, it's just like kind of okay. Now swing your sword and pretend there's something there you're hitting, and we'll just add it, you know, in post. And that's what it feels like, you know. So it's not great, but yeah, Garona kills King Llane, and then Lothar shows up, and he crotch slices Blackhand to win the fight. I'm not making this up. He literally slides between his legs and
yeah, exactly. It's over in 10 seconds. It's amazing.
Out of nowhere.
Exactly.
Yeah, like,
what I love is that we wasted all of that time on the really terrible battle between the humans and the orcs at the Dark Portal, and then we get this buildup. We're like, ooh, Blackhand has the fell now. Big fight coming. It's like over in 2 seconds. Okay.
Yeah,
well, I guess the fell isn't that great then.
Right. Well, because Blackhand the whole time is like, oh, I'm looking for a good fight in this land. Isn't anyone? And you see him. He sees Lothar fighting earlier in the movie, and he's like, oh, that guy's pretty good. You can tell he's like, whoa, I'm impressed by this human. And so they finally get to the point where they can 1v1, and then it's just, I'm gonna do this slidey, crotchy, slabby, or slide, crotch, slash, and that's it. And then Blackhand's like, oh man, that was so disappointing, and we were all disappointed. And then he leaves, and everyone's just like, yo, that was solid. I'm like, really? These orcs, the orcs who are so big on honorable combat, they just saw that fight and they were like, hey, fist bump. That was pretty sick. I've never seen someone crotch slice before. I guess being little, you can do those maneuvers. We've never seen an orc do that maneuver. Don't give Garona any ideas. That's it. Yeah. So then and they start.
We call that move the castrator.
That's right. But I love that after Garona kills Llane, the orcs start chanting Zug, Zug, Zug as well, which is just great. And then the movie just it kind of ends. They have a funeral. And they're like, for Azeroth, for Stormwind. And the thing is, or for the Alliance, and back, in World of Warcraft, it's always for the Alliance, for the Horde. Up until like around Legion, Battle for Azeroth, around that, then they started really pushing like, oh, the Horde and the Alliance have to work together and be best buds now. It's not for either one of those things. It's for Azeroth.
For Azeroth! For Azeroth and the Alliance!
So they had to put the For Azeroth thing in this movie like a bunch of times. And I got to be honest, I feel like I can speak for a lot of World of Warcraft fans where we liked being for the Alliance or for the Horde, and being for Azeroth just kind of sounds like we're being forced to wear that t-shirt that says, I just hope both teams have fun. We want the PvP side of things a little bit. We want the conflict a little bit. We want the orcs versus humans still we want the war in Warcraft, So I think including that in that movie, in that era of WoW, felt a little forced to coincide with the message in the MMO at the time. But that's a digression into MMO play. You wouldn't get it, Monty. You're not a World of Warcraft player, but other people out there would get it. Before the ending happens, though, Monty, something does happen that I've seen before in a segment where we call "I've seen that before." And when Draka, takes baby Thrall and escapes and has to,
it's not his name though.
Well, it is Thrall is
it's
his name.
Goel.
Yeah, but it's also Thrall. Whatever. Anyway, Goel means Thrall. Forget it. We know him as Thrall. But he is in a little basket, and she's like, "Oh no, the orcs are coming. I gotta save baby Goel / Thrall." And she just pulls a Moses. They rip it right out of the pages of the Old Testament, and she just sends him down the river in his little basket. I don't actually know if that's in the game lore or not. I have a feeling it's not, but I was kind of like, hey, I feel like where have I? Oh, the Bible. That's right. That's where I remember that from. Yeah, subtle reference there. Not a lot of people would catch that one, but it's in the Bible. But as being the nerd that I am, I was also like, hey, that was in Willow too. The beginning of Willow, they also send Elora Dunham in a little basket down the stream. So
what I love is, like, you take a story from not just the Bible but the Old Testament with, that's the part that all Judeo-Christian religions kind of share, right? So it's not even just Christians, like Jewish people, Muslim
it's
people.
like an Exodus. It's like in the second book or something. Isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It's an Exodus. So I think it's so funny. And also it's like, and then Thrall said, "Let my people go from the fell magic," later, which he did say.
And he does end up imprisoned, basically, as he's in the lore, he becomes a gladiator slave, basically, and then frees all of his people. So he doesn't part any seas, as far as I'm aware. There's no staff with a snake on it or anything in the desert at some point, but he does end up freeing his people. So, yep.
Well, he also takes them back to, like, the old ways, obviously. So there are some, like, Ten Commandments parallels too. But
Thrall is Warcraft Moses for sure.
He is. I mean, look, it's not an unfair parallel to draw, right? It's just incredibly obvious. And by the way, this isn't even like a post-credits scene. It literally, the movie ends, it shows you the Warcraft logo, and then it just goes into this extra scene for no reason. It's very perplexing.
Well, he pulls up on it has that, and then it's like it's like 2 seconds of credits, and then they have the scene where he bumps up to the riverbank, and some humans pick him up like, "Hey, check it out!" And then Thrall's like, "Rawr!" I mean, Joel's like, "Rawr!" A little baby roar.
You are the son of Duratan and Draka, an unbroken line of chieftains, and our people need a leader now, more than ever.
And then what would have actually happened is the humans would have just thrown him into the river for him to drown, because he's a freaky little orc baby.
So, but luckily for him, he rolled up on the doorstep of a slaver / gladiatorial guy who was like, "Man, I bet if I feed this thing, it'll get big enough to fight, and that'll be awesome."
And I definitely will be able to control it, because we're not having any orc problems here in Stormwind right now.
No. He was one of the guys that hadn't heard about it. He didn't know like, what's this? Oh, a little green baby, cool. He didn't know, I guess. I don't know where he was at. Wetlands
absolutely terrible ending this film. Yes. Just giga bad. I mean, the fight in the keep with the golem, which is the ultimate Chekhov's gun, where the golem comes to life, and then Khadgar. Yeah. By the way, how does Medivh just not care that Lothar and Khadgar are just running around in the same room as him, trying to kill him? Why doesn't he just kill him?
He could just make them explode, but he's possessed by the fell. And I think the explanation there is that he's supposed to be he is casting a spell the entire time. He's chanting that thing to keep the portal open, so he's occupied, and that's why the golem has to fight them. So there is a reason in the movie. There is. But you'd think he could, like, stop for a second, make them explode, and then be like, go back to say it. And like the portal would, like, go down this far and then go back
and
up
by
again.
the way, doesn't the demon want this to work? Like, the demon probably is like, what's this distraction in the room? Let me deal with that and take 5 seconds out of my life to deal with this.
Hold on 1 second. Zap.
And also the way that they just teleport the golem on top of it is so bad. Like, the fight choreography is so bad.
Like, I struggle to understand an in-universe reason why that would kill him, because he's been shown to be this ultra powerful magic user, and I guess he was just really surprised. It could happen to anyone. Could happen to anyone. Khadgar never done a teleport before, maybe, so he didn't know he could do it. I don't know. I have no explanation. That just happens. It was like, we gotta end it, and that's how they decided to do it. But yeah, that is one of my biggest complaints with this movie, is that the ending of that part of the story arc is just incredibly unfulfilling and disappointing. And what can you say? You know, when his ghost comes back in the Karazhan raid, you'd think he'd be more embarrassed. But remember, again, this movie does not take place in the game lore. This is a non-canon Warcraft story. So they can do whatever they want. They can make Garona half human. They can have Medivh get crushed by a big clay guy. My Garona. Yeah. Oh, my little orcish one. Yeah.
So bad.
Won't you give me some of that knife, Garona?
This movie's trash, Noah.
You know, in the game, she kills Llane Wrynn. I believe I've got this right. Is that she's got knives that were given to her by Gul'dan and as just super powerful, like assassin knives, because she's an assassin. And then he activates her like a sleeper agent, basically, by controlling her through these knives. And that's what makes her kill Llane Wrynn, is that she can't fight off the influence of Gul'dan for that moment or whatever. So, but in this one, no, Llane Wrynn just requests it. He's like, I'd like to die. Please kill me for friendship. Yeah.
For the good of my people.
Yeah. I think this will work out best for everyone if you kill me right now. So now there's a couple funny action adventure moments in the movie that I liked. I like when Khadgar, you know, is along and they have the like fight at the beginning and they're all like trying to chase after somebody and Khadgar is like, where's your horse? And Anduin's like, they took my horse. And he just goes, really? Because I think that's a funny action adventure moment because he's just so fed up with this kid who doesn't know what he's doing, you know. So I like that exasperated moment. That was funny. And then
wizards, am I right? Always losing their mounts.
Seriously.
Where's the Guardian?
Karazhan!
We need a prisoner. Where's your horse?
They took my horse. Really? Just stay there.
And then they have that campfire scene where Garona gives her sad backstory. I think that's the one or some other one. And then he just goes, well, that was cheerful.
Less so to have them run away. Well, that was cheerful.
And so you've got these like pithy moments where it's like, is this that kind of work in the moment, but then it goes back to is this a fun action adventure film, or is this like a serious war film where like people's children die in front of them and stuff, you know? Like this movie just doesn't really know what it is. And that's more examples of that. But I understand that you took issue with some crimes against art. That you would say there's art. There's this thing called art out there, and Monty has posited that there have been criminal acts perpetrated by this film against that thing. Felonies perpetrated against this thing called art. What do you got? What do you got for me?
So first off, just the aesthetic of the human characters, I think, is bad. All of the hairstyles look like these guys like Medivh and Lothar should be working in a coffee shop playing indie rock. The hair is just completely terrible. It just reeks of hipsterdom. Yeah, exactly. Also, you like the armor, but the reason why World of Warcraft and Warcraft looks like that is because originally it was an RTS, and in video games you had to have the big shoulders to differentiate units from an isometric perspective. It doesn't work in real life. It looks so stupid. It looks so stupid in this movie.
Wrong here, everyone.
They took the design that was necessary to distinguish silhouettes in video games and then ported it 1-to-1 into this film. Also, just aesthetically, it would have been better if it was all CGI, frankly. Or all motion capture, because the scenes where you have the orcs, like if you're just watching the orcs, it's actually really cool. And if you're just watching humans, it looks like trash. But especially it looks like giga trash when the humans are interacting with the orcs, because it's so off-putting to see them both on screen at the same time. And like Garona is obviously the worst part of this visually when it comes to that. So, I mean, those are my complaints about this film from an aesthetic perspective, because it feels very discombobulated, and I just wish it had been all CGI. That's what I wish.
You know what? I actually agree with you there. I agree that this would have worked better as all CGI, and people have been saying for years and years and years, oh, when are we going to get a full Blizzard CG movie? Because Blizzard does the best cinematics in gaming. They still do, they still do. So everyone would love to see a feature-length film. in the Blizzard cinematic style. And other companies have done it. We've got a couple Squaresoft ones. We got Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within. So if they can do it, come on, Blizzard. Come on, Papa Microsoft.
I mean, it's incredible to me that
Blizzard
Riot
CG
managed
film.
to
It would be
release
awesome.
Arcane before Blizzard managed to make an Overwatch TV series. That is crazy to me.
Exactly. So while I do agree that I would have rather saw a full Blizzard CG film for sure. I really love the attention that was put into making the physical versions of all of that armor, like the Stormwind guards, the shields, the
Looks
weapons.
like trash, man. It looks
They
like
all
a bad cosplay. It looks like a bad
they all are
cosplay in the movie. It just
It's
looks
a video
bad.
game film. It's a video game film. It's supposed to be bigger than life and outrageous and all that. And I
looks
really
terrible.
like the way they did it. I think it was awesome. I think
it contrasts extremely poorly to the CGI.
I think that was Weta that did that. Did the props.
It looks bad, man. Looks really bad.
Let me just double. Yeah. Weta Workshop that did Lord of the Rings did the props for.
They
the
really
Warcraft
went downhill in the 10 years that went between.
They absolutely did not. Leave a message in the comments below if you agree with me or Monty. I've got a feeling you'll agree with me. But I just want to know. I just want Monty to know as well, because I think the attention to detail in the sets and the armor was all great. And while it was
all just fan service. It doesn't feel like a real world.
That's why I liked it. Yeah, like I said, this film is not for you. This film is for me.
Not for anybody.
This film is for Warcraft films. This film is.
Doa, riddle me this. The guy who grew up playing Warcraft, who has very fond memories of Warcraft, if this film isn't for me, who the fuck is this film for? Who is it for? Because I come from a Warcraft world. I come from it. So who is it for?
You don't come from a world of Warcraft. You come from a Warcraft world. Those are two very different things, Monty. One is RTS, the other is MMO.
I'm the core audience of this movie.
Well, clearly you're not. Otherwise, you would have liked it.
Well, we really disagree there.
We definitely disagree. I knew we were going to disagree on this film because while I've talked a lot about all the issues.
I also just find its abuse of the actors that are in this like really egregious as well. Like I really like Ben Foster. Ben Foster puts on one of probably my favorite performances in cinema in the remake of 310 to Yuma. 310 to Yuma, because he is Charlie Prince. His character, he basically outacts Christian Bale and Russell Crowe in that movie, and his character's fucking amazing. He's like the best part of a very good movie. So I don't hate Ben Foster, but he's given nothing to work with in this movie. He's given nothing. The dialogue is trash. The characters have no arcs to them. Ben Foster is Medivh, and he's just like. It's like a demon at the end with no motivation. His character has no motivation. He's just evil for no reason.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. Medivh was one of the most. I would say if Garona is the most disappointing character in the movie, Medivh is the second most disappointing character in the movie.
Llane Wrynn, he's just naive and silly. Like he's a terrible king. He has no intuition whatsoever, no wisdom. He's just. He just takes everything at face value.
My problem with the person who played Llane Wrynn is that this character just doesn't bring I can't believe I'm going to say this. He doesn't bring the gravitas necessary for that role. But in this case, I'm right. Unlike when Riot said that about my commentating for League of Legends. But because you just look at the guy, he's too cute. His eyes are too big. He's too unassuming. He doesn't look regal, right? And so when you have this guy say, "Please kill me" at the end, Garona, you're like, yeah, he would say that, wouldn't he? But
I wish Garona had killed me at the end of this movie.
Reached to the screen. It was right through the extra portal, But you needed a king that had this like seriousness about him. You needed a king that made it feel tragic when he died. It made it feel like it was a real sacrifice, and yeah, I just didn't get a sense of regalness from him in this role at all. It does stand out as being particularly off-putting. And it's not to say that these are actors that have found a lot of success elsewhere outside of the Warcraft movie. They are good actors. It's just I do think this movie was fairly poorly cast as well. I don't think a lot of the people were right for their roles.
No, they had nothing to work with. It doesn't matter how this was cast. It just like they had nothing to work with. The characters
That's just
bad.
because you haven't seen Christopher Walken as Medivh. The Thrall is this green stuff that it makes you stronger. You gotta get more fell. I got a fever. It's one. We gotta have a segment called Recast where we do this kind of thing more regularly. But no, this movie wasn't cast poorly. I agree that the actors weren't given a lot to work with. I really hesitate to throw shade and the actors really at any time. I find it very difficult to criticize actors because I'm not an actor. I don't understand what goes into the performances and the things around the performances that affect you, the direction, the situation on set. So I find it very hard to criticize acting unless it's just overtly, objectively a preschooler could see it's bad, and so with this film, I will say
interesting
too that,
though
like,
is if we go back to Moon, I don't think Duncan Jones is bad at directing actors because Sam Rockwell is insanely good in Moon.
Yeah, I think it's the writing in this film pretty clearly.
It's the writing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But Duncan Jones did write it too.
Well, you say that. Like I said earlier, I think the IP was tainted and garbage from the beginning, so there's only so much you can do. It's only so much you could do.
I mean, I'm only seeing 2 writing credits on this.
Yeah, because the writers from Blizzard ruined Warcraft before it could even get on the desk of Duncan Jones. Look, he's not an alchemist, dude. He can't turn shit into gold. What do you want from him?
No, but you could have done. It is possible to do a good story in the Warcraft universe on screen in a film. You absolutely can. You absolutely can. You absolutely can. I know another director that took a convoluted mess of a fantasy story and made it into 3 great films. Those films were called The Lord of the Rings. Like
The Lord of the Rings has much stronger underpinnings.
Have you read those books?
Of course I have. I hate the Two Towers more than anything, but the underpinnings of Lord of the Rings were strong. The problem with Lord of the Rings was that the universe was good. The way the story was told in the books was bad, but the story wasn't bad. It was just, he was a bad writer. Tolkien's a bad writer. He's a great world builder. He's a great storyteller, but he's a fucking shit writer. He can't write. Okay. And so when you actually refine, that was like gold dust that was then forged into the One Ring. You know what I mean? There was good stuff in there. The problem with Warcraft is that there isn't good stuff in there. You can't make the fine jewelry out of this because there are no base materials to make something good.
Monty, you like to talk about art a lot. Have you ever heard about like found art? It's this modern art trend.
How about outsider art?
You just find pieces of things and you cobble it together, and then people tell you it's beautiful. Mm-hmm. If you're such a big art fan, shouldn't you appreciate that this movie is doing kind of a similar thing lore wise, where it's just finding a bunch of pieces and trying to put it together into something that's visually striking?
Is it visually striking?
Checkmate, atheists.
I feel struck by its visuals, as in beaten at times. And I have to look at Stormwind,
Doomhammer. I think the visuals are great. But anyway, so do you have any other crimes against art to
No.
List? Oh, okay.
This movie, I mean, besides all of it, the whole movie.
All right. Well, I feel like there's one thing we have to do, when covering a Warcraft film, it's probably the only time we're ever going to cover a Warcraft film.
One can only hope.
I hope not. I hope there is another one someday. Warcraft, the real beginning, the beginning, the second beginning, a new beginning. There you go. Rise of the Beginnings. That sounds like a very 2024 Hollywood name. Warcraft, Rise of the Beginnings. But we, there's a bit of a debate that's raged in the Warcraft community for many, many years, and that is it, for the Horde or for the Alliance. So Monty, I understand you're more of a for the Horde kind of guy. I'm more of a for the Alliance kind of guy.
In my brief time playing World of Warcraft, I did play Tauren Shaman. My very brief time playing it. But I also played Night Elf in Warcraft 3. That was the faction that I played in Warcraft 3 because I was a Spirit Moon fan, right?
Wait,
The
was
professional
Tauren
player.
Shaman the first character you played in World of Warcraft? The first character you made?
I think so. I don't
That
remember.
that is amazing because a Tauren Shaman was the first character I made in World of Warcraft as well. Wow, we were meant to be as a casting duo apparently. But
so
yet another
I
weird
mean, I
coincidence.
have to say I preferred in World of Warcraft the aesthetic of the Horde, but a lot of it was just because people I knew were playing Horde at the time. But I think the Horde, I prefer like the more monster faction. I think it's just cooler aesthetically, just like I thought the orcs were cooler aesthetically than the humans in this movie.
Well, you're wrong. I mean, while in the film Horde was definitely cooler than the film Alliance, but in real life, in the real world of Warcraft, the Alliance is much cooler because you have such a greater variety, right? Everyone on the Horde side has just got like, hey, I'm a kind of human-looking thing with tusks sticking out of different places. Meanwhile, on the Alliance, you have elves and dwarves and humans and all these different types of
Gnomes are
culture
so
and
lame.
architecture, and you have Worgen who are werewolf people, and we're gonna just claim Pandarans because they just seem nicer. So we got them too, even though they can be Horde, but we're not going to talk about that. But very clearly, the Alliance is the better faction. Yeah.
No, gnomes ruin it 100%.
What? How do gnomes ruin it? There weren't any
Gnomes are
in the movie
lame.
anyway.
Gnomes are lame.
Why are
Yeah,
gnomes-
exactly.
why are
Gnomes are
lame?
here you go. Gnomes are so lame they refuse to put them in this movie though.
Touche. That's that's a good point actually.
Because
how
here's
about
the thing.
trolls? There wasn't a single troll in the movie.
The trolls weren't part of the Horde at this point in time. Why would there be trolls in this movie? There aren't
Because
Tauren
they're-
in this movie either. It's not part of the alliance. It's not part of the alliance that is formed to create the Horde at this point in time. Why aren't the gnomes are so lame, Doa? They don't even get a throwaway line around the table in the 5 seconds that everybody tells Stormwind to go fuck itself.
It's because the gnomes weren't part of the Alliance yet at this point in time either. They were off doing their own thing in Gnomragon. This was before before the pollution that created the leper gnomes and forced the gnomes into sort of like not exile, but like to be refugees in Ironforge, obviously. So that's why this was before all that happened. So the gnomes were just off chilling in Gnomragan. So there you go. Checkmate. Well, once again, twice per episode. There were no Tauren either. I guess that's all the Horde. In the movie, there was no like Horde as we know it. The Horde was just orcs at that point. Right, there was no undead yet because the Lich King stuff hadn't happened. There were trolls. Trolls exist on Azeroth. There were troll wars. In fact, the big statue of Medivh in Stormwind that they show is the point in Stormwind where he held off the troll invasion of Stormwind earlier in the timeline. So, but we don't get to see any trolls in the movie. Which on the second viewing, I watched for the show, I was kind of disappointed about. No trolls. I guess we would have had to wait for Warcraft 2, which never happened.
Tides of
I'm so
boredom.
Man, I wanted another Warcraft movie. I still want another Warcraft movie.
How about a StarCraft movie? Sign me up for that one.
Really? After the way StarCraft 2 storyline went?
StarCraft 1 would be fire, man. The StarCraft 1 stuff
Sure.
would be very good.
Maybe they could go back and do StarCraft 1. Yeah, that'd be cool. StarCraft, the beginning. No, I mean, they don't even do StarCraft anymore, I think. No, I don't know. Is there ever going to be a StarCraft 3? Everyone else is making RTSs now. We'll find out, I guess. We're getting into the video game realm now. We're getting into our future podcast about video games instead of our current podcast about television and film. But any other things to talk about with the Warcraft movie? Anything
Don't
to
watch
add in
this
there?
movie. It's shit.
I will say if you're not a fan of World of Warcraft, you're probably not going to get a lot out of this movie. It's got some really cool visuals, but
It's not even explained. Nothing is explained. The
Yeah,
characters
it
are
doesn't-
the characters are just not even cool.
no,
Except
I
for
agree.
Duratan.
Like, yeah, I mean, it's kind of I feel like it's a triumph of motion capture. This movie, it's like it really is like a landmark motion capture film on the orc side of things. But outside of the visual elements, there is no redeeming value for a non-Warcraft fan. So I like watching this movie. I've seen it like 3 times, 4 times now, I think, total over the years since it's come out. I'll go back to it and watch because it is fun visually, and I do like to kind of look and pick out all the little things that I know from the game in there, and from that front, it is a fun movie to watch. But man, the story is just so convoluted and poorly written. It's too bad because it really could have. I think it could have been good, but it's not. So if you're not a big Warcraft fan or a big visual effects fan, probably give it a miss. This movie that's 8 years old now. Yeah, but hey, like we said, the World of Warcraft expansion came out. Yeah, it's on Netflix. You can go watch it on Netflix right now. You don't have to rent it. You just have to have a Netflix account, I guess. But the new World of Warcraft expansion came out, The War Within, and you know what? Let me chill for a second because it's great. I've been having a lot of fun playing it. So on the video game side of things, Warcraft is doing well. So ultimately, in the end, that's all that really matters.
Who was good that turned bad in this sequel?
Well, there was a couple. There's a although there
is
there
Sylvanas
is some
still bad?
that some cares. Sylvanas is currently in hell, individually redeeming every elf soul she was responsible for the death of until she's done. And there's a lot of them, so she'll be there for quite a while, which is fine. Her sister, Illyria, is one of the main characters in this one, and she has sort of like become one with the void now, and so she's got like void powers and stuff, and so that's causing a whole bunch of problems because her husband is all about the light. So 2 religions in one household. They're not really religions, but they kind of are. Anyway, it's awkward. It's a family drama thing.
Is that the War Within?
But the main bad guy is a former dagger. Name's Zalatath. There's no way I can
fuck this series, dude. Fuck Warcraft.
So see, Bagni Bronzebeard, who I believe we saw in the Warcraft film. I think
he was in there.
His dad. Yeah, he turned to crystal. He became like a crystal dwarf for a while and became the speaker for Azeroth. Azeroth could talk to him. The planet. By the way, the planet has a soul. The planet is actually a baby Titan, and the Titans, in case you're curious, are these sort of like intergalactic beings that are kind of the mortal enemies of the Void Lords, who are the big baddies in the WoW universe. The Void Lords, supposedly, right? They're the Burning Legion are kind of they're kind of responsible for that in some way, I believe. But anyway, so the Titans are trying to protect Azeroth because Azeroth is like got another Titan inside it, like a Titan baby, kind of, as I understand it. Some WoW like lore uber nerd is going to correct me on all of this, but anyway, Azeroth's been crying out in pain. Things have been going badly. Sargeras, one of the big like demon guys, the leader of the Burning Legion, essentially. Before he died, he stabbed his giant sword into the planet, and this sword is like a mile tall, right? And that's a problem for the planet. In fact, the blood of Azeroth essentially was crystallizing into the stuff called azurite, right? Which people could use to make super powerful weapons, and that was bubbling up because the sword stabbed Azeroth. So Battle for Azeroth, the expansion a couple ago, was about the sort of arms race to use this weapon of mass destruction, azurite, and the dangers of doing that. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's talk about Shadowland. No, never mind. We'll stop there. We'll stop there. Anyway, the game's really fun to play. I will never stop loving it. I love Warcraft for all of its convolutedness and goofiness on the story front. It's just fun. I just like doing dungeon, man. What can I say? I just like dungeon running.
Well,
always have, always will.
Now that we have a bit of a hiatus from new content coming out, guys, we're going to start our project, which will take a while. Because we're not going to stop doing everything else that's like contemporaneous or interesting on Nerd Legion. Mm-hmm. But before the 2nd season of Rings of Power comes out.
Oh boy.
We do have a week next week where I think, Doa, that we can do a little dabbling in our project of watching every 1980s sword and sorcery film ever. And so I posit that we should start with 1980, the first year of the decade, with Hawk the Slayer, a live-action film that will no doubt be quite terrible.
Have you seen Hawk the Slayer?
No.
I have seen it. You're in for a treat. Oh man, I can't wait to watch Hawk the Slayer again. It's so there you go. We should call that. We can just call this 80s fantasy films the beginning. So going back to 1980. Yeah, there will be a sequel. Well, that's gonna be fun.
That's what we're doing. So tune in. You probably don't have to watch that. We will explain it to you and laugh at it, and it'll be a good time will be had by all. So we'll see you then. Bye.